What if I told you that millions of Black Americans are still giving away their power? Without even realizing it, neither Democrats nor Republicans are really fighting for your community. Votes alone won't change anything. Brandon Tatum says real progress comes from one thing: leverage, ownership, taking control of your own money, your own projects, your own future. Today, we're breaking down why switching parties isn't enough, and what it really takes to demand respect, build influence, and create lasting change. Stick around, because what you're about to hear could completely change the way you think about politics, power, and your own community. What's up, everybody? It's your boy O'Shea Duke Jackson, back with another episode of Celebrity Junk. Recently, Brandon Tatum has come under fire from Hughley, who shared some strong opinions during a Vlad TV interview. At the heart of Hughley's commentary was the idea that many diehard Trump supporters, or conservatives in general, rarely think for themselves. And yet, despite their loyalty, they often receive no real respect from the very people they champion. He even pointed to moments like funerals, questioning whether any Black voices were actually given a platform. Candace Owens, for example, who has long supported Trump, didn't speak, and neither did others. Essentially, these loyalists end up as little more than window dressing. Brandon Tatum eventually responded on his channel, noting that both sides' remarks seemed petty, and that diving into every detail wasn't really worth the effort. Ultimately, Brandon Tatum summed it up bluntly. He's tired of fake Black dudes constantly talking about Black issues without actually doing anything to support the community, instead pushing people to vote Democrat. According to him, the frustration comes from the fact that more Black Americans are leaving the Democratic Party and moving toward the Republican side, refusing to buy what they're selling anymore. He framed it as leaving the Democratic plantation, a term that reflects breaking free from a system that hasn't delivered real progress. While Tatum is a registered Republican, he acknowledges that both sides have their flaws. The right often panders to white interests, while the left can rely on excuses like racism and white supremacy to avoid accountability. Ultimately, he argues, neither party genuinely prioritizes putting Black people in positions of power. Hughley, a staunch Democrat, represents a party that, in Tatum's view, promotes policies like illegal immigration and often sidelines the concerns of Black Americans, even as issues like LGBTQ rights dominate mainstream discourse. Brandon Tatum argues that liberal policies have left many cities in crisis: Oakland, Chicago, Detroit, all struggling with crime, fiscal mismanagement, and urban decay, problems he attributes to Democrats. Yet, when Black Americans vote Republican, they're often labeled racist or accused of self-hatred. On the other hand, many Black conservatives, like Tatum himself, are criticized for only highlighting Black-on-Black crime without providing broader context. While some situations are straightforward, others are complex, and Tatum has often positioned himself as advocating for victims in the Black community. Still, critics point out that his personal life, having a white wife and no deep community ties beyond his upbringing, raises questions about his connection to Black issues. Both political parties, he contends, fail to teach self-reliance or foster collaboration within the Black community, leaving them in systems that function as plantations of their own. Ultimately, Tatum invokes Martin Luther King's strategy. Black Americans should split their votes and leverage power across both parties, rather than blindly aligning with one, because true progress comes from independence and ownership. Tatum emphasizes that Black Americans should strategically split their votes and funding between political parties, similar to the approach some Jewish communities take, as a means of building leverage and empowering themselves. He stresses that the goal isn't about seeking approval from white people or expecting apologies for historical injustices. It's about creating independent strength within the Black community. According to Tatum, this requires investing in the community, setting high standards for education, entrepreneurship, and leadership, and working collaboratively to address systemic challenges. Voting Republican, he explains, is often a tactical decision designed to gain short-term influence or to signal dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. But it is not a comprehensive, long-term solution to the structural issues facing Black Americans. Ideally, Tatum envisions a political party or movement built specifically to serve the interests of the Black community, whether it leans liberal or conservative, because real power comes from ownership, influence, and self-determination within one's own group. To illustrate his point, Tatum shares a personal experience. when he attempted to bring a project from Uganda to Kenya, he offered to handle all aspects himself, covering the costs and taking full responsibility. Despite his dedication and clear plan, the company he approached ultimately ignored him. This example serves as a metaphor for broader political and economic realities. Without leverage and ownership, even the best ideas, efforts, or contributions can be overlooked. Tatum's message is unmistakable. Black Americans cannot rely solely on external parties, whether political or corporate, to respect their voices or prioritize their needs. Genuine influence and meaningful change require self-reliance, strategic investment, and a commitment to building power from within the community. Without these elements, political gestures and voter alignment alone will never be sufficient to secure lasting respect or real progress. Tatum argues that leverage is everything, whether in business, politics, or community development. Without it, even the most innovative ideas or earnest efforts can easily be dismissed or ignored. He illustrates this point using his own experience pitching a project in Africa. Despite having a solid plan and offering to fund and execute the project himself, the company he approached ultimately ignored him. The issue, he explains, wasn't a lack of skill, dedication, or competence. It was a lack of leverage. Had he arrived with more influence, established connections, or greater control over resources, his proposal would have commanded attention and respect. This experience, he contends, mirrors the reality for Black Americans in the political arena. Simply casting votes without accompanying organization, funding, or strategic action rarely yields real influence. Votes alone, no matter how numerous, are often insufficient to shift policies or demand accountability from elected officials. The real power comes when the community can mobilize resources, organize strategically, and create leverage that politicians and institutions cannot ignore. Tatum emphasizes that merely switching political allegiance, such as moving from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, is not a solution in itself. While some Black Americans see this as a form of liberation, or as leaving what Tatum calls the Democratic plantation, it is insufficient unless the community also invests in its own initiatives. Without financial contributions, organizational structures, and strategic planning behind political engagement, the move is largely symbolic. Politicians may court votes rhetorically, but if those votes are not backed by tangible support, funding, mobilization, and visible advocacy, they do not translate into meaningful leverage. In other words, one party to another does not automatically equate to empowerment if the community has not created mechanisms to assert influence. This leads Tatum to highlight a broader, deeper problem: a lack of ownership within the Black community. Ownership, in his view, is about more than just property or businesses. It is about having control over decision-making, funding, and organizational capacity. It is about establishing structures that allow the community to act independently, set its own priorities, and assert its interests without relying on external validation or support. Without ownership, communities remain vulnerable to the agendas of others. In politics, this means that Black voices, while visible, are often ignored unless paired with leverage that compels attention. In business, it means opportunities can slip away if control is not asserted. Ownership is not easy. It requires hard work, sustained effort, and long-term commitment, but Tatum stresses that it is non-negotiable for true empowerment. Both Tatum and D.L. Hughley, he notes, exemplify a common pattern, relying on outside influence and funding to advance their agendas. Whether through Democratic support, white Republican donors, or organizations such as Turning Point USA, they often benefit from external resources rather than building influence and wealth directly within the Black community. Tatum critiques this reliance, arguing that it perpetuates dependency and limits long-term empowerment. Real change, he insists, cannot come from outside sources. It must originate from within the community itself. It requires creating organizations, funding initiatives, mentoring youth, and investing time and resources in ways that generate enduring influence and opportunity. Leverage, according to Tatum, is the ultimate tool for empowerment because it transforms potential into tangible power. A community with leverage can demand accountability from politicians, shape policies, influence economic decisions, and protect its interests in ways that those without leverage cannot. Achieving this requires a multifaceted approach: financial investment, strategic organization, mentorship, and the willingness to tackle difficult, often thankless work. It also demands patience, vision, and an understanding that progress is rarely immediate. The benefits of leverage accumulate over time and are most effective when rooted in sustained, deliberate action. Tatum also underscores the importance of self-reliance in tandem with leverage. Communities that rely on external parties for guidance, validation, or funding are inherently limited in their ability to exert influence. True empowerment, he argues, comes from cultivating independence, both economically and politically. This means creating systems and institutions that serve the community's interests first, developing leaders from within, and ensuring that resources circulate in ways that reinforce collective growth. Without self-reliance, any shift in political alignment or temporary attention from outside actors is unlikely to produce meaningful, long-term results. Finally, Tatum stresses that leverage is not just about political power or money. It is also about credibility, visibility, and respect. Communities that demonstrate cohesion, organization, and strategic action earn the kind of respect that compels others to listen. Conversely, communities that are fragmented, underfunded, or dependent on external actors often find their voices marginalized, their concerns ignored, and their potential unrealized. In this context, Tatum's overarching message is clear. Black Americans must take ownership, invest in their own development, and build the leverage necessary to demand recognition and respect. Without this foundational work, political votes, narratives, and advocacy, even when well-intentioned, remain insufficient to achieve meaningful, lasting empowerment. In short, Tatum's argument revolves around a simple but powerful principle. Leverage and ownership are the keys to real progress. Without them, even the best ideas, most passionate advocacy, or largest voter turnout can fail to produce lasting results. The work is hard, often exhausting, and frequently underappreciated, but it is indispensable for communities seeking true self-determination, influence, and empowerment. Tatum emphasizes that building and investing in the Black community is hard work, and it is work that most people are unwilling or hesitant to do. The challenge, he notes, is that while it is easy to talk about Black issues, whether on social media, at rallies, or in casual conversation, actually rolling up one's sleeves and putting in the effort to make tangible changes within the community is a different matter entirely. Talking about these issues can even be profitable. It can attract attention, followers, or financial support from organizations, donors, and political groups that want to align themselves with someone who speaks passionately about the struggles of the Black community. Yet, this type of engagement is often performative. It doesn't address the root causes of systemic problems, nor does it create lasting structures that allow the community to thrive independently. The day-to-day work, the kind that builds genuine progress, is difficult. It requires mentoring young people, organizing resources, establishing local initiatives, holding people accountable, and consistently showing up to do work that may never generate headlines or recognition. It demands patience and an unwavering commitment to results over the long term, rather than quick wins or easy narratives that appeal to outsiders. Tatum draws a striking parallel to men who go overseas in search of feminine women, suggesting that this desire is rooted in benefiting from someone else's hard work. In many of these communities abroad, local men have spent generations shaping their culture, raising families, and investing in the social and moral structures that support traditional norms of family and community life. The men who go abroad to seek these women are, in essence, reaping the rewards of work they did not do themselves. They enjoy the outcomes without engaging in the processes that created those outcomes, and they avoid confronting the responsibilities that come with sustaining a healthy, thriving community. In this sense, Tatum argues, a similar dynamic exists in Black America. Many men seek easy solutions or shortcuts instead of putting in the work to transform their own neighborhoods, schools, and families. The longing for instant fixes, outside validation, or solutions handed down from external forces replaces the difficult, sustained effort necessary to create meaningful change within one's own community. He further highlights that many Black men in America avoid the difficult work of improving their own communities, opting instead for quick fixes, temporary escapes, or alignment with political narratives that promise change but rarely deliver it, voting for one party over another without accompanying action, without funding initiatives. Creating organizations or investing directly in the well-being of local communities does not amount to real progress. Similarly, rhetoric and public posturing may generate attention and even social capital, but without concrete follow-through, they do little to shift systemic dynamics or empower the next generation. Tatum is clear. The work of community building cannot be outsourced or delegated to politicians or outside organizations. Neither Democrats nor Republicans will bring about meaningful progress unless the Black community itself creates leverage, invests in its own priorities, and takes ownership of its collective destiny. The implication is profound. Waiting for external actors to solve internal problems is a strategy doomed to underachievement. While taking responsibility for one's own community is both empowering and necessary, Tatum also stresses the importance of self-reliance and accountability. Communities that thrive are those that invest not just time and money, but also energy, vision, and discipline. It requires establishing local institutions, mentoring youth, providing business opportunities, and fostering an environment in which community members hold each other accountable for personal and collective success. This kind of work is painstaking, often underappreciated and frequently invisible to the wider public. Yet, it is the work that ultimately strengthens a community's social and economic foundation. Without it, no amount of political affiliation, media attention, or rhetorical support can replace the stability and empowerment that comes from self-sustained development. Tatum's point is clear. Votes alone are not enough. Speeches and narratives alone are insufficient, and symbolic gestures, while well-meaning, cannot substitute for hard, tangible labor that builds infrastructure, knowledge, and opportunity. Ownership is another central concept in Tatum's argument. He emphasizes that real empowerment comes from claiming control over one's own resources, initiatives, and political influence. If the Black community does not actively own businesses, fund initiatives, or shape local political priorities, it will continue to be at the mercy of systems designed without their interests at heart. Even when Black Americans shift their votes to a different political party, Tatum argues, the act is largely symbolic unless it is paired with investments that give the community leverage. Political votes, like financial contributions, are only as powerful as the structure supporting them. Without sustained organization and resources behind them, they are unlikely to elicit genuine attention or action from political actors. This underscores his broader point that empowerment is not about aligning with one party or another, but about building the capacity to influence outcomes through deliberate effort, strategy, and community-driven initiatives. Ultimately, Tatum's message is a call to action. He challenges Black Americans to move beyond performative engagement and superficial support, emphasizing that true empowerment requires intentional, consistent work. This includes holding oneself and others accountable, investing resources in local communities, establishing structures for mentorship and growth, and refusing to rely on external parties for solutions. The alternative, he warns, is perpetually leaving one's community vulnerable to outside control and influence. A modern form of dependence he likens to a plantation, in which the residents have little real power. The path forward, Tatum asserts, lies in embracing hard work, cultivating self-reliance, fostering accountability, and creating the leverage necessary to demand respect and achieve tangible results. In essence, nothing will replace the effort, investment, and ownership that the Black community must undertake itself. Without these foundational elements, no voting, rhetoric, or political alignment can produce meaningful change.